I did notice that prosecutors emphasized, and I wrote an article that kind of highlighted this, that, I mean, he was sued in November 2023, and then the raids were in March 2024. And we all know that around that time he was under so much scrutiny. So he knew he was under federal investigation, but then Jane was allegedly being victimized after that. And I know Teny and Mark were representing him at the time because we've seen the emails that they had with prosecutors. Was there any concern at the time about what was going on with Jane, or do you think that's just an example of prosecutors, trying to find things that aren't there?
Well, I've got a couple of things on that. If you look at the timeline, what really heated up, I think, what cinched the prosecution was the leaked video. I think that was the game changer, if there's such a thing, because you think at that point, I've taken a lot of heat over the years for always calling the prosecutor's presentation the character assassination block. There is inevitably, in every one of these kind of scandalous or tabloidy trials, there's always a block of witnesses who are focused on the character assassination. And my God, you can't find better character assassination, and rightfully so. I'm not denigrating Puff. He knows how bad that was. He knows just what it looked like. I think one of the mistakes, if you will, by the prosecution was to try to take that and make it something it wasn't. Was it violence? Absolutely. Was it? In a way, kudos to my daughter for talking about that and saying, I loved the idea that she said, if this were a domestic violence case, we wouldn't be here. That's like, wow, I hadn't thought of that. And for the prosecutors to say that was part of the freak-offs, that she was being chased, Cassie was being chased down the hallway to get back in there for the freak-offs. When clearly, if you take a look and slow down the tape, you could see what it was about. It was about a cell phone, and she had taken his cell phone. And I don't know about you, Meghann, but I know so many. I used to say I know so many violent acts that happen at Thanksgiving dinners between people arguing about politics. Now that has morphed into, I know so many criminal acts that arise out of somebody grabbing somebody else's cell phone. Nothing makes somebody go 0 to 60 quicker than grabbing their cell phone.
Yeah, I mean, it was still a pretty appalling act.
It's indefensible. So
yeah. And what about him coming back into public life after this? Because I was interested in the whole, alleged bribery. You can say it was bribery, or you can say it was him just trying to do what celebrities do to clean up their image. But he was definitely offering money to try to keep that video silent. And the whole premise was that, if this gets out, it's going to destroy his career. But now the video's been out and there's all this other stuff. Do you think his career's destroyed, or do you think he can come back from this?
No, I have spent time with him all the way along in post-conviction, on the two-man acts. And I've known him for going on 20 years. In fact, I had forgotten that it had been that long, and I won't tell you how I was reminded. But I think, and I've said this a lot of times in the context of guys who get sent to a camp, for instance, in federal, that they come out after 24 months and they're physically and mentally in the best shape they've ever been. He has this timeout, so to speak, has been enormously productive for him. Some of the talks, the insight, he's always been an impressive human. And I think he'd be the first to admit that the drugs had a horrible effect. And one of my worries about this case was if you tried it in New York, you wouldn't understand the LA aspect of it. And all of my New York friends told me that I was being kind of naive, that New York was much harder than LA, and they'd be harder, the jurors would be harder. And I think it came out. But in LA, everybody understands, and my podcast partner Harvey Levin is kind of the chief among this, that you have to manage your image, and a tape like that Somebody would presumably, as it was, they'd sell it for money, and it would be, and it's, as you say, it's kind of a Ray Rice situation, in the elevator. And how do you get past that? I think he can get past it. In fact, I know that he will, and I think that he's been reading voraciously while in custody. I've just sent him a couple of things that I wanted him to read as well. He gave me a couple of things, or told me a couple of things. He's just been using his time productively. He's been thinking, and I see a next chapter, and I think it's going to surprise people.
Yeah. I mean, how is he feeling about his upcoming sentencing? It seemed like there was kind of a momentum, especially outside, that, he's going to walk out of the courthouse or something. Did you guys, as his legal team, honestly think that there was a chance at bail, especially with the Bail Reform Act mentioning this charge and the need for incarceration? Are you all prepared that he's going to be doing a couple more years, or do you think he's going to be out?
I think he should be out. In the euphoria after beating all of, the RICO, I think, is mandatory 10. Sex trafficking on Cassie, mandatory 15. Sex trafficking on Jane, mandatory 15. That's what I said. I mean, who do you have that's going to roll the dice on those things? That's a pretty,
it's life, a possible sentence. Do you think if he'd been convicted on that, they would have gone for life?
He's 55 years old. If he's doing the mandatory minimums, I mean, it's absent some extraordinary intervention, it's something else. Now, I think, contrary, but this is just me, this isn't necessarily the law. I think when you roll the dice and you win with those kinds of odds, you ought to get some kind of consideration. You ought to get acceptance. The 3 levels for acceptance. You ought to get a downward departure or a variance, because you were demonstrably overcharged. So, there ought to be some punishment. By the way, I think if the courts started doing that, the federal courts, you would, to get back to what you're saying, you would see there would be an incentive for prosecutors not to overcharge, because if they knew that they were going to get hit on the other end by loading up a indictment with, a ton of charges to scare somebody into pleading, if they knew that if they went to trial and beat them, they were going to get a benefit, that would, I think, rein in rogue prosecutors. And by the way, I don't think all prosecutors think that way, but anytime it's high profile, it's a whole different world.
And what do you think about the next couple of months? Is there going to be a motion for new trial? Is there? We still need the ruling on the rule.
Ruled on the Rule 29. I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I don't know. I mean, I think that the first thing, as you mentioned, it hasn't even been, since we're doing this live, I think it's been about 25 hours since the judge issued his order. So I think that if it were me, I would be doing all hands on deck to find every single case that in the last 100 years.
Yeah.